Emotional dependence occurs when a person relies excessively on others for validation, security, and a sense of self-worth. It often stems from deep-seated fears of abandonment, rejection, or inadequacy, leading to an unhealthy attachment where one's happiness and emotional stability are dictated by external sources rather than internal resilience. People who experience emotional dependence often feel an overwhelming need for reassurance from others, whether it be from romantic partners, friends, or family members. They might constantly seek approval, feeling anxious or distressed when they don't receive the level of attention they expect. This creates a cycle of neediness, where an individual becomes trapped in a pattern of looking outward for fulfillment instead of cultivating inner strength. One of the clearest signs of emotional dependence is difficulty being alone. When a person cannot find comfort in their own company and constantly craves interaction or validation, it suggests a reliance on external forces to provide a sense of belonging. This is often accompanied by fear of being forgotten, fear of being unimportant, or fear of not being enough without someone else affirming their worth. Such fears may cause individuals to overextend themselves in relationships, prioritizing others' needs over their own in a desperate attempt to secure their place in someone's life. They may struggle with setting boundaries, fearing that asserting their own desires will push people away. This can lead to an imbalance where they become people pleasers, suppressing their own needs and emotions just to maintain relationships. Another key aspect of emotional dependence is the impact it has on self-esteem. When someone's confidence is entirely tied to how others perceive them, their mood and self-worth fluctuate based on external validation. If they receive praise or affection, they feel good about themselves. If they face criticism, neglect, or rejection, their self-esteem plummets. This makes them vulnerable to manipulation and emotional turmoil, as their sense of identity is fragile and contingent on how others treat them. They may experience deep emotional distress when a relationship changes or when they perceive distance from someone they care about, even if that distance is natural or necessary. This instability can create a constant state of anxiety, making it difficult to develop a true sense of self that is not dependent on outside influence. Emotional dependence also leads to an inability to make decisions independently. People who struggle with this issue often second-guess themselves, seeking excessive input and approval from others before making choices. They may fear making the wrong decision because they equate their worth with how others perceive their actions. This lack of confidence can extend to all areas of life: career choices, personal goals, and even daily decisions. Over time, this can lead to stagnation, as they hesitate to take action unless they have external confirmation that they are making the right move. This indecisiveness stems from a lack of trust in their own judgment, reinforcing the cycle of dependency. A major reason why emotional dependence develops is past experiences, particularly in childhood. If someone grew up in an environment where love and approval were conditional, only given when they behaved a certain way or met specific expectations, they may have internalized the belief that they must earn love and validation. This can carry into adulthood, making them feel that they are only worthy when they are meeting others' needs, not simply for being who they are. Similarly, if someone has experienced abandonment or emotional neglect, they may develop a deep fear of losing people, leading them to cling too tightly in relationships. This fear of loss can cause them to tolerate toxic dynamics, accepting mistreatment just to avoid being alone. The emotional wounds from the past create patterns that influence present relationships, making it difficult to form secure, independent attachments. In many cases, emotional dependence is mistaken for love or deep connection. People may believe that their intense need for a particular person is proof of their devotion, when in reality it is a sign of an unhealthy attachment. True love and healthy relationships allow for independence and individuality, whereas emotional dependence creates entanglement. where one person feels incomplete without the other. This often leads to unrealistic expectations in relationships, with the emotionally dependent person expecting their partner or loved ones to fulfill all their emotional needs. When this expectation is not met, it results in feelings of disappointment, resentment, or even desperation. They may accuse others of neglecting them, when in reality, the issue stems from their own inability to self-soothe and find fulfillment within themselves. The problem with emotional dependence is that it places control of one's emotional well-being in the hands of others. This can make a person feel powerless, as they are constantly at the mercy of external circumstances. If someone they rely on withdraws, becomes distant, or even simply has other priorities, the emotionally dependent person may spiral into feelings of worthlessness and despair. They might overanalyze every interaction, searching for signs of rejection or abandonment, which in turn creates stress and insecurity. Instead of being able to process their emotions rationally, they become consumed by the need to regain reassurance. This can make relationships strain, as the constant need for validation can be exhausting for the other person. It can also lead to self-sabotaging behaviors, such as pushing people away out of fear or becoming overly clingy in an attempt to keep them close. The cycle of emotional dependence can also impact personal growth. When someone is overly focused on others for their sense of self, they often neglect their own passions, interests, and goals. They may mold themselves to fit the expectations of those around them, losing touch with their authentic identity. This makes it difficult to develop a strong, independent sense of self, as their actions are driven by the need for approval rather than personal fulfillment. Over time, this can lead to frustration and resentment, as they may feel like they are living for others rather than for themselves. Instead of discovering what truly brings them joy, they prioritize what will make them more accepted or loved. This hinders their ability to experience genuine happiness, as their sense of fulfillment remains tied to external validation. Recognizing emotional dependence is the first step toward breaking free from it. By understanding the ways in which one's emotions, actions, and self-worth are influenced by others, a person can begin to take back control over their own happiness. It requires honest self-reflection and a willingness to address deep-seated fears and insecurities. The process of overcoming emotional dependence involves learning to be comfortable with oneself, developing self-sufficiency, and finding stability from within rather than seeking it externally. Building self-worth is a crucial step in overcoming emotional dependence, because it shifts the focus from external validation to internal confidence. Many people struggle with low self-worth without even realizing it. As it often manifests in subtle ways, it can be seen in how they talk to themselves, the way they react to criticism, and their tendency to compare themselves to others. At its core, self-worth is about recognizing one's intrinsic value, independent of achievements, relationships, or other external factors. It is about understanding that worth is not something that needs to be earned. It is something that already exists within each person. However, due to societal pressures, upbringing, and past experiences, many people internalize the belief that they are only as valuable as what they can offer to others, making them dependent on external approval to feel good about themselves. One of the main reasons people struggle with self-worth is that they have been conditioned to seek validation from others. From a young age, people are often rewarded for pleasing others, whether it is getting good grades to gain a teacher's praise, behaving a certain way to be accepted by peers, or meeting expectations set by parents. While there is nothing wrong with wanting to be recognized for accomplishments, problems arise when validation becomes the foundation of self-worth. When people grow up believing that they must constantly prove themselves to be worthy of love, respect, or acceptance, they become trapped in a cycle of seeking external reassurance. They begin to rely on compliments, achievements, and the approval of others to feel good about themselves, rather than developing a stable sense of self-worth that comes from within. This dependence creates insecurity, because external validation is unpredictable and temporary. If a person only feels valuable when they are being praised, They will struggle with feelings of inadequacy whenever they are criticized, ignored, or feel unappreciated. Another key aspect of self-worth is how people treat themselves. Those with low self-worth often engage in negative self-talk, constantly criticizing themselves for their flaws and mistakes. They may believe they are not good enough, smart enough, or attractive enough, and these thoughts become ingrained in their self-perception. This inner critic is often shaped by past experiences, such as growing up in a household where perfection was expected, experiencing rejection, or being compared to others. Over time, this negative self-perception becomes a habit, reinforcing the belief that they are not valuable unless they meet certain standards. This makes them more susceptible to emotional dependence because they rely on others to counteract their own negative thoughts. If someone tells them they are important, they feel temporarily relieved, but if they face criticism or neglect, their self-doubt returns. This instability makes it difficult to develop true confidence. Developing self-worth requires a shift in mindset. Instead of looking outward for validation, a person must learn to find fulfillment within themselves. This means recognizing that their worth is not determined by others' opinions, achievements, or relationships. One way to do this is through self-acceptance, learning to embrace both strengths and weaknesses without judgment. Many people believe that they must be perfect to be worthy, but this is an impossible standard. True self-worth comes from acknowledging imperfections and understanding that they do not diminish one's value. Instead of focusing on what they lack, individuals should recognize their unique qualities, skills, and experiences that make them valuable. This shift in perspective allows them to see themselves in a more compassionate and realistic light. Practicing self-care is another important aspect of building self-worth. When a person values themselves, they treat themselves with kindness, respect, and care. This involves setting aside time for activities that bring joy and fulfillment, whether it is pursuing hobbies, engaging in physical exercise, or simply resting when needed. Many people who struggle with self-worth neglect their own needs because they prioritize others, believing that they must constantly prove their value through service or sacrifice. However, self-worth is not about what one does for others. It is about recognizing that one deserves care and kindness, just like anyone else. When a person makes self-care a priority, they reinforce the belief that they are valuable, independent of their role in others' lives. Setting boundaries is another powerful way to build self-worth. People with low self-esteem often have difficulty saying no, fearing that they will be rejected or seen as unkind if they assert their own needs. They may overextend themselves, agreeing to things they do not want to do just to keep others happy. This can lead to exhaustion, resentment, and further self-doubt, as they feel like their needs and desires do not matter. Learning to set boundaries is an act of self-respect. It communicates that one's feelings and well-being are just as important as anyone else's. This does not mean being selfish, but rather recognizing that it is okay to prioritize oneself. When people start setting boundaries, they may feel uncomfortable at first, but over time, it reinforces a sense of self-worth because they are no longer sacrificing themselves for approval. Another important part of building self-worth is breaking free from comparison. In today's world, it is easy to fall into the trap of comparing oneself to others, especially with social media constantly showcasing people's successes and curated lives. Many people measure their worth based on how they stack up against others, whether it is in terms of career achievements, relationships, appearance, or material possessions. This comparison game is endless and damaging because there will always be someone who appears to have more. Instead of comparing, it is important to focus on personal growth and self-improvement. Self-worth should come from within, not from external measures of success. When people shift their focus to their own journey, they begin to appreciate their progress and unique strengths instead of feeling inadequate. Building self-worth also involves challenging limiting beliefs. Many people carry false beliefs about themselves that were formed through past experiences. They may believe that they are not lovable, not smart enough, or not deserving of happiness. These beliefs are often based on past failures, negative comments from others, or societal expectations. However, Just because something was believed in the past does not mean it is true. Challenging these thoughts involves questioning where they came from, examining whether they are based on facts or assumptions, and replacing them with healthier beliefs. Instead of thinking, I am not good enough, a person can reframe their thoughts to, I am learning and growing every day. Over time, changing these internal narratives helps strengthen self-worth and reduces the need for external validation. Developing self-worth is a continuous process that requires self-awareness, patience, and practice. It is not about reaching a state of perfection, but about cultivating a stable and resilient sense of self. When a person recognizes their worth, they no longer feel the need to seek approval from others to feel whole. They become more confident in their decisions, less afraid of rejection, and more capable of handling challenges independently. They learn to celebrate their achievements without needing others' recognition and accept themselves fully, even in moments of struggle. Developing emotional independence is essential for creating a stable and fulfilling life because it allows a person to navigate their emotions without being controlled by external influences. Emotional independence does not mean shutting people out or avoiding relationships, but rather having the ability to regulate one's emotions, find fulfillment within oneself, and maintain stability even when faced with challenges. Many people unknowingly depend on others to provide emotional security, whether it is through constant reassurance, validation, or the belief that someone else is responsible for their happiness. This creates an unhealthy reliance on external factors, making a person vulnerable to emotional instability when those factors change. True emotional independence means being able to experience emotions fully while maintaining control over how they influence thoughts, behaviors, and overall well-being. One of the biggest obstacles to emotional independence is the tendency to let external circumstances dictate inner emotions. Many people feel happy when they are praised and valued by others, but become anxious, insecure, or unworthy when they experience rejection, criticism, or indifference. This happens because they have given power over their emotions to outside sources. When a person is emotionally independent, they recognize that while external events can influence how they feel, they do not have to control them. They learn to separate their self-worth from the opinions and actions of others, ensuring that their happiness and confidence remain intact regardless of external validation. This does not mean ignoring emotions, but rather developing the resilience to process and manage them effectively. A key aspect of emotional independence is learning to self-soothe. Many people look to others to comfort them when they are sad, frustrated, or overwhelmed, relying on friends, partners, or family members to provide reassurance. While seeking support is natural and healthy, problems arise when a person becomes unable to cope with their emotions on their own. Emotional independence means having the ability to comfort oneself in times of distress without always needing external validation. This can be done through self-care practices, mindfulness, journaling, deep breathing, engaging in hobbies, or simply allowing oneself to feel emotions without immediately seeking distraction. The ability to sit with emotions, understand them, and manage them without external dependency strengthens emotional resilience and helps a person feel more in control of their well-being. Another important element of emotional independence is developing internal motivation. People who struggle with emotional dependence often seek approval and encouragement from others before taking action. They may hesitate to pursue goals or make decisions unless they receive reassurance that they are doing the right thing. This reliance on external motivation can be limiting because it makes success and fulfillment dependent on other people's responses. To become emotionally independent, a person must learn to find motivation from within, setting goals based on personal values and desires rather than external expectations. When someone is driven by their own ambitions and passions, rather than the need for validation, they develop a stronger sense of purpose and confidence in their ability to navigate life's challenges. A crucial part of emotional independence is the ability to handle rejection and criticism without allowing it to define one's self-worth. People who are emotionally dependent often take rejection personally, seeing it as proof that they are not good enough or valuable. They may dwell on negative feedback, replaying it in their minds and allowing it to shape their perception of themselves. Emotional independence means recognizing that rejection and criticism are inevitable parts of life and do not reflect a person's entire worth. It involves learning to view feedback as an opportunity for growth rather than as a judgment of one's value. This mindset shift helps a person become more resilient, allowing them to face setbacks and disappointments with confidence rather than self-doubt. Emotional independence also requires breaking free from the habit of blaming others for one's emotions. Many people fall into the pattern of thinking that others are responsible for their happiness or suffering. They may believe that if someone else had acted differently, they would not feel a certain way. While it is true that people's actions can impact emotions, emotional independence means taking full responsibility for one's reactions. Instead of blaming a partner for making them feel unworthy, a person can recognize their own insecurities and work on strengthening their self-esteem. Instead of feeling resentful when someone does not meet expectations, they can learn to communicate their needs and set boundaries. Taking responsibility for emotions empowers a person to make changes in their own life rather than waiting for others to change. Developing emotional independence also involves building a strong sense of identity. People who are emotionally dependent often lose themselves in relationships, adopting the opinions, preferences, and desires of others in an attempt to feel accepted. They may struggle to make decisions on their own, fearing that choosing differently from others will lead to disapproval. Emotional independence means knowing who you are outside of relationships and external influences. It involves understanding personal values, beliefs, passions, and goals, and making choices based on them rather than out of a need to please others. When a person has a strong sense of identity, they feel more secure in their decisions and are less likely to be swayed by external pressures. One of the most challenging but rewarding aspects of emotional independence is learning to be comfortable with solitude. Many people fear being alone because they associate it with loneliness or a lack of worthiness. They may jump from one relationship to another, constantly seek social interaction, or avoid spending time with themselves because they are uncomfortable with their own thoughts. However, solitude can be a powerful tool for self-discovery and emotional growth. When a person learns to enjoy their own company, they become less dependent on others for emotional fulfillment. They start to appreciate time spent alone as an opportunity for self-reflection, creativity, and relaxation rather than something to be feared. Being comfortable with solitude allows a person to build emotional resilience and reduces the desperation that can come from relying too much on others for companionship and validation. A significant part of emotional independence is learning to manage expectations in relationships. People who are emotionally dependent often place unrealistic expectations on others, believing that their loved ones should always be available to support them, reassure them, or make them feel better. When those expectations are not met, they feel hurt, rejected, or abandoned. Emotional independence means understanding that no one else is responsible for another person's emotions. While support and love are valuable, expecting someone else to always fulfill emotional needs is unfair and can strain relationships. Developing emotional independence allows a person to approach relationships from a place of mutual support rather than from a place of neediness. It helps create healthier dynamics where both individuals can be themselves without feeling responsible for each other's emotional stability. One of the biggest benefits of emotional independence is the freedom it brings. When a person no longer feels controlled by their emotions or dependent on others for happiness, they gain a sense of empowerment. They are able to make choices based on what truly aligns with their values rather than out of fear or insecurity. They become more resilient in the face of life's ups and downs, knowing that they have the tools to navigate challenges without relying on others to fix things for them. They develop deeper, more fulfilling relationships because they are no longer seeking someone to complete them, but rather to complement their already whole and independent selves. Setting boundaries is one of the most powerful ways to break free from emotional dependence because it establishes clear limits on how others can treat you and how much of your energy you are willing to give. Many people who struggle with emotional dependence have difficulty setting boundaries because they fear rejection, conflict, or disappointing others. They often say yes when they want to say no, tolerate mistreatment because they do not want to lose a relationship, or take on responsibilities that are not theirs out of guilt. This lack of boundaries leaves them emotionally drained, resentful, and feeling as though they have no control over their own lives. Learning to set boundaries is not about shutting people out or being unkind. It is about protecting your emotional well-being and ensuring that relationships are built on mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. One of the main reasons people struggle with setting boundaries is the deep-seated need for approval. Many emotionally dependent individuals believe that their worth is tied to how much they do for others. They feel responsible for other people's happiness and go out of their way to avoid conflict, even at the expense of their own well-being. They may overextend themselves, constantly saying yes to favors, taking on emotional burdens that are not theirs to carry, or suppressing their own needs to keep others comfortable. While this may seem like kindness, it often leads to resentment, burnout, and a loss of self-identity. When a person's sense of worth is dependent on how much they give, they become trapped in relationships where they feel used, unappreciated, or emotionally exhausted. Setting boundaries helps break this cycle by shifting the focus from pleasing others to taking care of oneself. One of the biggest misconceptions about boundaries is that they push people away, but in reality, they create healthier and more balanced relationships. When boundaries are unclear, relationships become unbalanced, with one person constantly giving and the other constantly taking. This dynamic leads to frustration and emotional exhaustion. However, when boundaries are in place, both individuals in a relationship understand what is acceptable and what is not. They learn to respect each other's limits, communicate more openly, and create an environment where both people feel valued rather than drained. Boundaries do not weaken relationships. They strengthen them by ensuring that they are built on mutual respect rather than unspoken expectations and unbalanced emotional labor. One of the most challenging aspects of setting boundaries is dealing with the guilt that often follows. Many people feel selfish when they start prioritizing their own needs, especially if they are used to always putting others first. They worry that saying no will make them seem uncaring or that people will be disappointed in them. However, setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of self-respect. It is recognizing that your time, energy, and emotions are valuable and should not be given away without consideration. The reality is that people who truly care about you will respect your boundaries, while those who only valued what you could do for them may resist. This resistance can be difficult to handle, but it is a clear sign of who respects you as a person versus who only values what they can get from you. Setting boundaries requires clear and assertive communication. Many people assume that others will automatically know their limits, but the truth is that unless boundaries are clearly expressed, people may unknowingly cross them. It is important to be direct and honest when communicating boundaries, rather than expecting others to guess or assume. For example, if someone constantly expects you to be available at all hours, setting a boundary might mean saying, I value our conversations, but I cannot always be available. I need time for myself, and I would appreciate it if we could talk at times that work for both of us. If a friend or family member constantly criticizes you, a boundary might be, I understand that you have opinions, but I will not engage in conversations where I feel disrespected. Being clear and firm about boundaries ensures that they are understood and taken seriously. Another important aspect of setting boundaries is following through with consequences. Many people set boundaries but do not enforce them, which sends the message that their limits are flexible or unimportant. If someone continues to violate a boundary, it is necessary to take action, rather than simply repeating the boundary. For example, if a person constantly disrespects your time by showing up late or canceling plans at the last minute, enforcing a boundary might mean no longer making plans with them. If someone repeatedly crosses emotional boundaries, enforcing a boundary might mean limiting contact or distancing yourself from the relationship. Boundaries are only effective if they are upheld. Otherwise, they become empty words rather than a tool for self-protection. Emotional boundaries are just as important as physical and time boundaries. Many emotionally dependent individuals allow others to dictate how they feel, absorbing their emotions as if they were their own. They may feel responsible for making others happy, feel guilty for someone else's problems, or take on the emotional burdens of others at the cost of their own well-being. Emotional boundaries mean recognizing that you are not responsible for managing other people's emotions. While offering support and kindness is important, it is not your job to fix or carry the emotional weight of others. Learning to separate your emotions from those of others allows you to maintain your own emotional stability, rather than becoming overwhelmed by the moods and needs of those around you. Setting boundaries also means learning to say no without justification or excessive explanation. Many people feel the need to provide long-winded excuses when declining something, fearing that a simple no will not be enough. However, you do not owe anyone an explanation for prioritizing yourself. Saying no is a complete sentence. If someone asks you to do something that you are not comfortable with or do not have the capacity for, it is okay to simply say, "I can't do that," or "that doesn't work for me." Over-explaining boundaries often invites others to argue or push back, making it harder to stand firm. Learning to say no with confidence reinforces the idea that your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. Boundaries are also necessary when it comes to digital spaces and communication. In today's world, people often feel entitled to instant access to others through text messages, social media, and phone calls. Many emotionally dependent individuals feel obligated to respond immediately to messages or be constantly available, fearing that delayed responses will upset others. However, setting digital boundaries is just as important as setting personal ones. This can mean turning off notifications, deciding not to respond to messages immediately, or setting specific times for social interactions. It is okay to take space from digital communication without feeling guilty. Your time and mental energy are valuable, and you do not have to be accessible to everyone at all times. One of the most transformative effects of setting boundaries is the newfound sense of self-respect and confidence it brings. When you stop allowing others to overstep your limits, you start valuing yourself more. You begin to trust yourself, knowing that you are capable of protecting your well-being rather than relying on others to dictate your happiness. This shift in mindset is incredibly empowering because it reinforces the idea that you are in control of your own life. Instead of being emotionally dependent on others, you become self-reliant, resilient, and more selective about who you allow into your space. This creates an environment where you are surrounded by people who respect and appreciate you, rather than those who take advantage of your kindness. As you become more comfortable setting boundaries, you will likely notice changes in your relationships. Some relationships will improve as mutual respect and understanding grow stronger. Others may fade away as those who thrived on taking advantage of your lack of boundaries will no longer be able to do so. While losing certain relationships may feel difficult at first, it is ultimately a positive shift. It means that the people in your life are there because they respect you, not because they can manipulate or control you. The more you practice setting and enforcing boundaries, the easier it becomes. And over time, it transforms not only your relationships, but also your overall emotional well-being. Developing self-sufficiency is one of the most essential steps toward emotional independence because it allows a person to rely on their own internal resources for stability, confidence, and fulfillment, rather than depending on others to meet their emotional needs. Many people who struggle with emotional dependence find themselves constantly seeking reassurance, validation, or comfort from external sources, whether it be through relationships, social interactions, or even distractions like social media. They may feel uneasy or incomplete when they are alone, looking to others to fill an internal void. This kind of reliance makes a person vulnerable because it means that their emotional well-being is controlled by forces outside of their own influence. If the people they depend on are unavailable, disinterested, or unable to provide the support they crave, they may feel lost, anxious, or rejected. True self-sufficiency, however, creates a sense of inner stability that remains intact regardless of external circumstances, allowing a person to navigate life with confidence, resilience, and a deep sense of self-worth that is not easily shaken by the actions or opinions of others. One of the most significant aspects of self-sufficiency is learning how to be comfortable in your own company. Many emotionally dependent individuals avoid spending time alone because they associate solitude with loneliness, emptiness, or a lack of worthiness. They may constantly seek out social interaction, fill every free moment with distractions, or jump from one relationship to another in order to avoid being alone with their thoughts. However, being alone does not have to be a negative experience. In fact, solitude can be one of the most powerful tools for personal growth and emotional independence. When a person learns to embrace time spent alone, they begin to understand themselves on a deeper level. They develop their own interests, hobbies, and passions, rather than simply following the preferences of those around them. They learn to sit with their emotions rather than running from them, processing their thoughts in a way that leads to greater self-awareness and emotional resilience. Instead of feeling like they need someone else to make them happy, they begin to find joy, peace, and fulfillment within themselves, making them far less vulnerable to external influences. A crucial part of self-sufficiency is cultivating internal validation rather than seeking it from others. People who are emotionally dependent often look to external sources to determine their worth. They feel valuable when they receive praise, approval, or attention from others, but they feel insecure, unworthy, or inadequate when they face criticism, rejection, or indifference. This constant need for validation creates an exhausting cycle of emotional highs and lows, where a person's sense of self fluctuates based on how others respond to them. Breaking free from this cycle requires learning to validate oneself from within. This means recognizing and appreciating your own strengths, achievements, and qualities without needing external reinforcement. It means setting personal goals and feeling proud of your progress, regardless of whether others acknowledge it. It means developing an inner voice that is supportive, encouraging, and affirming, rather than relying on the opinions of others to determine your self-worth. When a person becomes their own source of validation, they no longer feel the need to constantly prove themselves to others, seek attention, or change who they are in order to gain approval. They become more confident, self-assured, and comfortable in their own identity, making them emotionally independent rather than dependent on external validation. Another key component of self-sufficiency is emotional self-regulation, the ability to manage emotions without relying on others to stabilize them. Many emotionally dependent individuals turn to others for reassurance, comfort, or distraction whenever they feel upset, anxious, or uncertain. While seeking support from loved ones is healthy in moderation, relying on others as the primary way of coping with emotions can become a problem. It places too much responsibility on others to manage emotions that should ultimately be managed from within. Developing emotional self-regulation means learning how to process feelings in a healthy way without needing constant external input. This can involve mindfulness practices, journaling, deep breathing exercises, or engaging in activities that bring peace and clarity. It also means learning to sit with emotions rather than suppressing them or immediately seeking distraction. By becoming comfortable with emotions, both positive and negative, without feeling the need to escape from them or seek immediate comfort from others, a person gains emotional strength and resilience, making them more self-sufficient in handling life's inevitable challenges. Self-sufficiency also requires taking full responsibility for one's happiness. Many emotionally dependent individuals fall into the trap of believing that happiness comes from external sources, whether it be from relationships, achievements, material possessions, or the actions of others. They may believe that if only they find the right partner, land the right job, or receive the right kind of validation, they will finally be happy. However, placing happiness in external factors creates a fragile and unpredictable emotional state because those factors are always subject to change. A truly self-sufficient person understands that happiness is an inside job. They do not wait for someone else to bring them joy or fulfillment. They create it for themselves. This means cultivating a mindset of gratitude, finding meaning and purpose in daily life, and engaging in activities that bring personal fulfillment. It also means reframing challenges and setbacks as opportunities for growth rather than sources of despair. When a person takes full responsibility for their happiness, they become emotionally independent rather than dependent on external circumstances or people to dictate their well-being. A fundamental part of self-sufficiency is financial and practical independence. While emotional independence is primarily about managing one's emotions and self-worth without external validation, financial and practical independence play a significant role in reinforcing this mindset. Many people who struggle with emotional dependence also rely on others for financial security or everyday decision-making, which can make them feel trapped, powerless, or incapable of standing on their own. Gaining financial independence by earning one's own income, managing personal finances, and making responsible financial decisions provides a sense of freedom and self-reliance. Similarly, learning basic life skills such as cooking, problem-solving, and handling responsibilities without relying on others builds confidence and reinforces the idea that one is fully capable of taking care of oneself. When a person knows they can provide for themselves both emotionally and practically, they no longer feel the need to stay in unhealthy relationships, tolerate mistreatment, or seek validation from external sources in order to feel secure. Another important aspect of self-sufficiency is developing a strong sense of personal identity. People who are emotionally dependent often mold themselves to fit the expectations, preferences, and desires of others in an effort to gain acceptance or avoid rejection. They may change their opinions, suppress their true feelings, or compromise their values to maintain relationships. However, true self-sufficiency means knowing who you are at your core, what you believe in, what you stand for, what you love, and what your personal values are, without feeling the need to conform to external influences. It means making decisions based on what truly aligns with your authentic self, rather than what will earn approval from others. A strong sense of identity creates inner stability, allowing a person to navigate life with confidence and integrity rather than being swayed by external pressures or expectations. Building self-sufficiency also requires embracing self-growth and continuous learning. A self-sufficient person understands that personal growth is a lifelong journey and actively seeks ways to improve, evolve, and become stronger. They take responsibility for their mistakes, learn from challenges, and invest in their own development, rather than expecting others to provide all the answers or solve their problems. They seek knowledge, explore new perspectives, and push themselves outside of their comfort zone because they recognize that growth comes from experience and self-reflection. This mindset of continuous self-improvement reinforces emotional independence because it ensures that a person is always evolving and strengthening their inner resources rather than becoming stagnant or overly reliant on others for direction. Ultimately, self-sufficiency transforms the way a person interacts with the world. Instead of approaching relationships from a place of neediness or insecurity, they approach them from a place of wholeness and confidence. They no longer look to others to complete them, but rather to complement the life they have already built for themselves. They form connections based on mutual respect rather than dependence, allowing for healthier, more fulfilling relationships. They no longer fear being alone because they have cultivated a fulfilling life within themselves, making them emotionally strong, resilient, and truly independent. When you stop being emotionally dependent on others and cultivate true self-sufficiency, you unlock a level of freedom and inner strength that transforms every aspect of your life. You no longer feel controlled by the actions, opinions, or validation of others because your sense of worth comes from within. You develop relationships based on mutual respect rather than need, and you become confident in your ability to handle life's challenges without constantly seeking reassurance or emotional support. This shift empowers you to make decisions that align with your values, pursue goals without fear of judgment, and live life on your own terms. Emotional independence does not mean shutting people out or avoiding connection. It means embracing relationships from a place of strength rather than weakness. It means knowing that while love, support, and companionship are beautiful aspects of life, they are not necessities for your happiness or survival. You are already whole. When you learn to stand on your own, you experience relationships in a healthier, more fulfilling way. Choosing to be with people not because you need them, but because you genuinely want to share your life with them. The journey toward emotional independence is not always easy, but it is one of the most rewarding paths you can take. It requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to break old patterns. But the result is a life where you are no longer at the mercy of external influences. Instead, you become your own source of strength, happiness, and fulfillment. And when you reach that point, you will realize that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself.